What is it that you don't like to do? Now, I'm not talking about things that are bad. I'm not talking about things that are wrong. I'm just talking about what is it you don't like to do? You've heard me say more than one time, I'm an introvert. So you can imagine I don't like to go to social functions where you have a lot of small talk. So I avoid a lot of them, not all of them, but I avoid a lot of social functions. What else is it that you don't like to do? Well, you can start thinking of a list in your mind. What I want you to do, and I'm going to focus on pastors in this episode of Church Answers Podcast. What I want you to do is to start thinking about some of the things that you like least in ministry and why you need to understand that particular thing that you don't like because of the consequences it will have in your church and in your ministry. Once again, welcome to the Church Answers Podcast. My name is Thom Rainer. We are always sponsored by Belay. Go to belaysolutions.com to see all that they have to offer. You've heard me say that ever since Church Answers existed, we've had at least one Belay worker in our organization. We still do. And it's an incredible organization that matches you with that type of assistant or bookkeeper or other position. And they have a high bar to even let people be a part of the Belay network. And so you're getting the best of the best, and you're getting people to do the things that will make you and your organization more productive. Speaking of productive, download their ebook, The Power of Productivity. It'll be helpful for you. Go to Thom at 55123. That's THOM at 55123. Why do pastors need a keen understanding of their least favorite activities? I'm going to frame this in my personal context for one of my least favorite ministry activities as a pastor. Of course, I'm looking to the past. I'm no longer a pastor, but having served 4 churches as a pastor in 4 different states, I consistently would see this as something that I would put off and try not to do. Okay. One of my least favorite ministry activities was counseling. I am not a good counselor. I think I score low on the empathy scale. I could find myself in a counseling session with my mind drifting and thinking that time was passing so slowly. I can remember as a pastor dreading counseling appointments. I can remember all that. Now, some of you may say, well, that's not me. Of course, everybody's different. I love doing ministry outreach. I love leadership. I liked preaching. There were many things I would rather do. And I found myself trying to put off the counseling whenever possible. Okay, using that as a framework, and you can fill in the blank for what you least like to do. But using that as a framework, let's look at some reasons why you need an awareness of this, because you may need to take some countermeasures there are going to be things that are not in your sweet spot. Never known a pastor that gets excited about every aspect of pastoral ministry. So if this is something that is one of your least favorite, I want you to have this awareness. If you don't take countermeasures for this, number one, it will be de-emphasized in the church. I think about all the needs that came out of COVID and post-COVID. Of course, counseling needs were needed. They were vital before then, but especially now. And if I'm leading a church and it becomes de-emphasized in my church to be able to talk with people and to help them or to refer them because it's not something that is in my sweet spot, it can hurt the church. It can hurt the church members. It can hurt the kingdom. So one of the reasons that you need to have a key understanding of your least favorite is because it will be de-emphasized in your church, because many people will follow your emphases and they will say those are the most important things. Similar, number 2, it will hurt the church culture. Think of a church culture that does not have empathy. Think of a church culture that does not reach out to people who are hurting and offer to talk to them or listen to them or to find a place for them to get help. Just because Thom Rainer does not have this strength of counseling does not mean the church I serve and lead does not need a ministry that is similar to that, at least a place where you can point them to. So one of the reasons that you need to understand, look at where your least favorite area of ministry is, and it's likely that the church is de-emphasizing it and it is hurting the church as well. Okay, that's an example with counseling. Let me give you one that is common with many pastors: evangelism. Many pastors say, I don't have the gift of evangelism. Well, you know what? That's like saying, I don't have the gift of mercy, so I don't show mercy. It means I don't have the gift of serving, so I should never serve anyone. Because you don't have the gift does not excuse you from the mandate of evangelism. And if that is not your sweet spot, you need to be aware. Number one, it'll be de-emphasized in your church, which we're seeing it in many churches. And number two, it will hurt the culture of the church because the church will not have an outward focus. For those two reasons, whatever your least favorite ministry activities are or is, it is going to hurt the church unless you compensate for them. Okay, that brings us to the third point. If and when you recognize your least favorite ministry, you need to make certain that you are compensating for it. What do I mean? Sometimes it means if you can go multiple staff, that the next person that you bring on onto the staff needs to be someone who does not clone you, but complements you. And by complement, I mean has the strengths in the area of your weaknesses. If you cannot afford staff, you probably need a layperson who will work with you, and that person can complement you instead of no emphasis on it as well. In one of my churches, in my last church before I became a dean of a seminary, I was able to find someone who is a professionally trained Christian counselor in our church. She had retired, but when I brought up the idea to her about seeing people at least at a first level before referral, she got real excited about it. In fact, she became one of my go-to persons. She was never compensated. She did it for free. She loved doing the ministry. And people knew that when I asked her to do this ministry, that I didn't say, I don't like doing this, so I'm finding someone else. They knew that it was a priority. And so the church was able to find counselors, was able to find people that needed help and match them together. And she even built up a referral network where we could go far beyond our own church. So hear this well. If you have an area of ministry that is really not your sweet spot, really not something that you enjoy doing, maybe you even don't like doing it, like me in counseling. I used to dread doing that. I think I just realized that I needed more empathy and I needed more training. I just wasn't good at it. That particular area is going to be de-emphasized in your church. And if you are de-emphasizing a legitimate part of the body of Christ, it is going to hurt the church and is going to hurt the church culture. So you need to have an understanding. Ask yourself, what don't you like doing? There's a good possibility that once you answer that question with one or more answers, that you're going to discover that you need to compensate for it. I mentioned that I was able to find someone to help lead a counseling ministry in our church because I was so weak for it. So what is your least favorite areas of ministry? One or more? My number one was counseling. My number two, I don't know if it's an area of ministry. I just didn't like meetings. I think that was legitimate because we had way too many meetings in most of my churches, but that's another story for another day. Find your least favorite area of ministries. Make certain that you're compensating for them. If not, the body of Christ will be hurt and it will be de-emphasized in your church. I love having you here at the Church Answers Podcast. I grab your time for 10 minutes or less and just share one major nugget with you. This one, the least favorite area of ministry. I'm really appreciative of you listening on your favorite podcasting app or viewing at our small but growing audience at YouTube. So thank you for that. Thank you also because I've been mentioning a book called When the People Pray, a book I wrote about praying for your pastor for 30 days. Grab that book, give it to church members, whether you're a pastor or another church member, and start a movement of praying for your pastor. And always remember to go to Belay, belaysolutions.com, to find your people that you need to have a more productive organization. And much like we're talking about here, to do the things that are not your sweet spot, but you know need to be done. Thank you as always for being a part of the Church Answers Podcast. We'll see you 3 episodes a week. See you then. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just two or three things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well. And maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.